All right, YouTube. So this is the long-awaited Canon R5 Mark II deep dive into how to set this thing up from a photography perspective. We'll do a video one completely separate. Keep in mind, this takes a lot of time to make. It takes weeks, and it's something that I'll make available on my channel up until the end of October for you to be able to view free, and then I'll go into a members only section if you want it, and if you're a member you'll be able to see it. And it's got a lot of incredible amounts of detail that you are not going to see in most of the other tutorials that are out there, because most people will gloss over menu items and things like that, and not tell you why they don't use it. They just don't know why. They just don't use it. So then they just tell you, don't touch it, leave it alone. But why? Oh, I don't understand it. They won't tell you that because they're just too cool, and everyone is becoming an expert on YouTube today. So I'm not trying to prove to you that I'm an expert. I've been doing it for 38 years, shooting Canon. I think I know just a little bit about it, and I actually have an official website. I have an actual business. I don't know how much more proof you need than that. I'm not a YouTuber just trying to wing it to get some views. So, credibility part, let's just put it aside. At this point, I think many of you already know kind of the things that I've shot, done, all kinds of things, the clients that I shoot for. Some of them are pretty big names. So you pick your own battle. Number one, before we get started in this, video all the way through, I have to be careful because I have wirelessly transmitting everything off of the R5 Mark II to an Atomos Ninja, which is recording up here, and then I also have a screen here so I can follow along with you and actually guide you through it step by step, section by section, page by page. That's very important. So everything is broken down by sections, so you can easily go back and view it. It's also broken down by page, right? So you go page by page across till the section's over. You can pretty much sort of master that section. So having said that, this is not the be it all type of thing, but it is a, how can I say it? It is a guide that you cannot beat for the money, for what you're getting. So I am going to remove this guy. Oops, sorry. That's the onboard microphone there. I'm actually going to remove that, and we are going to go with just the studio mic. You should have much better quality at this point than what you just did a couple minutes ago, and then we'll get underway. This is my first time actually doing something like this with so many gadgets around. But I think it's about time that not only YouTube, but the photography world actually hear it from people that really know what they're doing out in the field and not giving you the wrong information, so you can maximize, all the money that you spent on the camera. I do have a lens attached to the camera. I highly, highly recommend that each and every one of you at least have a lens attached to the camera when you do this, because there are going to be certain functions where you're going to need a lens, especially the control ring functions when we get to that section. So get a smaller lens, stick it on there. If you have a kit lens, perfect, while you set this up, and then you can put on your big one if you don't feel comfortable hanging out with a big one. So with that, what are we going to do? Let's go into section 1, which is going to be a shooting menu. But before we get into that shooting menu, let's actually make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row before we actually start to do this tutorial. Number one, okay, there are certain, prereqs that you gotta have before you actually start doing this, because if not, you're going to be very frustrated and things are not going to be good. So number one thing that we're going to do is I am going to pop up both myself on the bottom right, like always, and obviously the menu up top. We're going to just head on over to the wrench section for a second, because this is very, very important that we do this together, and that you are very well aware of what needs to happen. So battery info is very important. you need a fully charged battery before you do this. If your battery is not charged and you're not using the LP E6P battery, there are going to be a lot of things that I'm going to talk about that you won't be able to do. So don't blame the camera, don't blame Canon for it, blame yourself. Get your battery charged before you actually set this up. Once you set it up, no problem. You should be good to go. But that's how you check the battery. It's on page 6 of the wrench, and we're gonna go through there. Before we do that, there's something else we need to do. We need to reset the camera. Why am I telling you this? Because many of you that belong to my Facebook groups have complained that I was suffering from not as sharp photos with my R5 II. Please know, there are a lot of YouTubers and a lot of people that bought these cameras just to get views. They've probably got it set up and screwed it up, left it in electronic shutter mode, and returned the camera. When you got the camera, it already had certain things already turned on. Please reset it, and once they resetted it, there is no image quality issue at all, right? So please be careful when you're buying it and who you're buying it from. Okay, that's the worst thing about electronic shutter, because you can still have 0 shutter count because nothing's been shot on the mechanical shutter. So you don't know if someone's had that camera before. Reset the camera first, like you're seeing up on the screen. We're going to do that first right now. I'm going to reset my camera. I'm probably going to lose the connection, right? That's okay. Now it's actually asking you 2 questions. Do you want to reset the individual settings, which means whatever you customized, or do you want to actually do a factory reset? I recommend doing a factory reset before you do anything at all. So do a factory reset, hit OK, and we're probably going to lose the screen. Like I said, we did, right? Because the camera is actually resetting itself now. So while the camera is actually doing that, and we're regaining, connection back here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the keyframe off. I'm going to go back here for a second and then do this. So the camera is back live. Now it's telling me to set up the camera from the beginning. All right, we're going to go in. We're going to set this camera up from the beginning like you got it right out of the box. Reset the factory one first, and then we'll walk right through it. So before we get into that, go get a nice drink. This is going to be long, and it's not going to be painful, but it's going to be long. All right, so we need to do that. And I need to actually tell the camera not to shut off, because I am telling the camera to shut off. Yeah, well, it reset, so all of my other settings are not set up anymore. So you can see like how much stuff is actually going into making this whole thing actually come alive, that you'll see as the final product. But nonetheless, go ahead and grab a drink, and we will reconvene back here shortly. Thanks. All right, welcome back to chapter 1, which is the red shooting menus. But before we get to chapter 1, we got to set up the camera. So let's set up the brand new camera, and then we'll do the red menu next. All right. So when you first get the camera out of the box, you do the factory reset, right? And even if it shows up like this, reset it anyway, because I don't trust it. A lot of people are shipping these cameras where other people have actually touched them, fooled around with them, things like that. So what you're seeing on the screen is my wireless piece going up and causing it to do that. So if I turn the camera off and then turn it back on, we should come back to, give me 1 sec, let me go and shut it off fully. There we go. And then fully turn it back on. It should ask me to set up the camera. Press in for English if you are in English. This is your month, so we're on the 9th month, and today is the 15th, and right now is 2024. Yep. And right now it is about 1:30 in the afternoon, so it'll be about 1300 hours and 33. That's the time, and I am not in London time zone. I'm actually in New York time zone. So I gotta scroll till I find, sorry, keep scrolling, you'll scroll back up, New York time zone, and it will set it up for you. Okay, so Pretty easy. What you're doing is you're actually going with the wheel in the back of the camera and the set button right in the middle of it. And here we are. You can see it starts with JPEG and HEIF and all that. So first things first, I like to set up on page 1 of the red menu. Going in here, I like to set up my large JPEGs, which is the top one. And all I'm doing is I'm just turning this guy, the dial. You can even use a joystick if you really want, right? I like the dial and the set button because they're all right there in one thumb action. So that's what I'm doing. Click into that. I like to make it 10, and then from there I just hit the menu button. It says it menu on the bottom. Hit that, you're out of there. Image type, I like to shoot for JPEGs. If I'm shooting RAW plus JPEGs, I shoot the largest JPEG available for me, right here. And then if you're going to shoot RAW and JPEG, what you want to do is hit, once you're in that menu, if you move the top toggle right here, this little wheel up top, this one, that's the picture that you're seeing on the screen. If you turn that, you can change it between RAW and CRAW, or no RAW and just shoot only JPEG down below. If you want to change the JPEG size, you're going to move the control dial here, down below. It's got a picture of it. It makes it very dummy proof, guys. You don't have to be a genius. So this is how I typically shoot, RAW plus JPEG, like that, if I'm doing both, okay? Cropping aspect ratio, this is very important. If you want to shoot full frame on the Canon R5 Mark II, 45 megapixels, leave it full. If you want to shoot crop, which means you're going to use the APS-C size of the sensor and disregard everything outside of that, that's 1.6 crop. 1:1 aspect ratio, 4.3. Most of them are usually 4.3, most of the photos out there. And then 16:9 if that's what you really want. You figure out what the output is. I usually shoot full, and then I figure it out later on what I want to do. There's one thing that's very important on the bottom of the screen. When you click your info button, it says if you click info, it will show you the shooting area. What do you want? Here. Masked or outlined. What that means is it's going to show you the area which is going to be captured onto the file. Everything outside of that will not. If you want an outline, you do that. You want a mask, you do this. I do the mask. That's what I like. If you like the outline, play with it, see what you like. That's what that is. Okay? So you do that, and then you hit set to do OK. Page 1 of tab 1 is done now. These are tabs up top, so the red shooting menu is tab 1. Page 1 is done. Page 2. Again, keep in mind, we're setting this up for bird and wildlife and birds in flight and those kind of things. So you come over here, this is your exposure compensation, right? Your compensation is up top. Again, same thing. It's showing you which dial does what on the right side. Once you figure this out, it's very easy. Their systems are very simple, right? How that works. If you want to change the auto bracketing, if you're shooting brackets, which means you're shooting 4 shots at a time, bracket them together, give me a shot. That's where you set this auto exposure bracketing right here, and you can change that with the top dial, and you can see that on the right side which one does that. Okay. I usually don't do a lot of auto bracketing. I usually will take the exposure compensation from time to time, a stop up, stop down, usually stop down, especially if it's a pure white bird. Or if I don't have highlight tone priority on, I will go about a stop and a half below, just to make sure I don't blow the bird out. Advanced techniques coming later. That's not part of this, okay? ISO speed settings. This will get you in a lot of trouble if you don't pay attention, okay? Pay attention to this section very closely. If you leave it on auto, it's going to continue to go through it, and what I just did right now by moving it out of auto and turning the main control dial, now I just put it into manual mode. I'm telling it what it is. It's no longer auto. If you leave this to auto, be very careful out of the box. Like you see now, it goes from 100 all the way to 51,200. You could be in trouble because you could get into a situation where the light drops and this thing is going to push it to 51,200 before it starts to lower the shutter speed. That's how auto ISO works. So what that means is you need to put limits here, and you can go to high too if you really want to. So again, you press into it with the set button and then turn with the control dial, and then you'll be at wherever you want. I typically leave this to about 6400. If I have to go too much over 6400, I usually will leave it at 6400 and then do +1 on the exposure compensation like you saw, right? You can do that. Same idea. It's just all on how you're actually handling it. So this is the full range of the ISO. So you could leave this to 51,200 if you really want to. I leave it at 6400 as a separate fail-safe, where it's not available to me anything higher than that, because I don't shoot higher than that. So why do I need it? And I don't want to ever run the risk of actually the camera ever going into that mode. Auto range. This is the range that the camera is going to use and fluctuate between depending on the scene that it sees, and try to keep the auto exposure using auto ISO within that range. This is where I leave it 6400 for sure and hit OK. Minimum shutter speed. This is very important. Okay, you can leave it to auto. And this might not be a good idea, especially if it's birds in flight. If you're doing birds in flight, you want to make sure that you have minimum shutter speed set so you do not get blur. If you're really after the blur, then fine, leave it on auto, and it's probably going to drag the shutter. So if you go to manual, scroll down with the control dial, and then pressing the set button. Now what's going to happen here is you can go here, and once you're in here, to actually change it, you're actually going to use the top dial. You can see the little dial. It shows you which dial changes it right here. I typically, as a fail-safe, even birds in flight, if I know it's a really bright day, I'll change this to 1/1000th of a second, but typically 500 is good enough for me. That's where I leave it. That's where I had it set up. So before I erased all this stuff, I did this so I could make this tutorial together with you. So that's why this was done this way. This section here now is done. Next one, flicker shoot. This is very important. If you're shooting events and weddings and things like that, you can enable it, right? And it's also giving you a little warning. There's going to be a shutter lag. Obviously, if there's flicker that it detects, it's going to retard the shutter to make sure you don't get banding and all that crap happening in your photos, right? So it's giving you that warning, so you don't sit there and say, oh, my camera's broken. No, it's not. It's not. So this should, for bird and wildlife photography, this should be disabled. High flicker shooting, this is something that's not available right now to you at all, because all of that stuff also translates between photo and video as well. Okay, and if you enable this, you can see it's still not there, right? So be careful that if the thing is grayed out like this, that means it is not available in the shooting mode that you're in. That's very important. Okay, external speed light control, you're not going to touch this right now. Why? Because you're actually not going to attach a flash unless you're doing with a snoot up top and you're shooting something like a hummingbird or something with a flash and a snoot. You can enable this, and then you can change this face. Okay, I'm going to go back for a second. You enable it, ETTL. I typically will leave it ambience priority, so then it knows what the natural light looks like and what the actual white balance really looks like right there from the camera, and it tries to balance it out. It just looks a little nicer. If you got faces of people that you're shooting, then that's what you would do. Evaluative is it's going to evaluate the entire scene. Averages is going to take an average of the entire scene. Evaluative will actually take what different zones are within that and actually just figure out you know, values where it knows where the subject is in that frame. The average takes an entire average of the entire frame and then gives you more of a average metering for what the flash should do. Right here you have, let me open it up. So this is continuous flash control. What this really means is ETTL for each shot or just the first shot. If you do each shot, it's going to probably it's going to retard the shutter some, because it has to actually calculate this for every flash that it actually fires. If you do it for first shot, it will, whatever is on the first shot, it will take that and apply to all of the shots. This will go really fast, especially if you're in a burst mode type of situation. Sync speed priority, what that means is if you're shooting high speed sync, it's going to make sure that that is taking priority over anything else that you have actually got turned on here. Right? This is very important. Right? So when you go here and you start to set up things for slow synchronization, you need to be very careful what you're selecting here. Most people that shoot wedding and events will pretty much have this set to fixed, not to auto. Because sometimes if the flash hits and it starts to drag that shutter speed, this is shutter speed on the left side here that you're seeing. You could have blurry images. Set this to fixed. And for this particular function to work, you actually have to have a flash unit attached, and it reads and then it lets you control the flash from the camera. Same thing here. So, all right. We're good here on the flash. I took up a lot of time, but it's not going to apply so much to birds and wildlife, but it could. So I've gone through it. I'm not telling you, oh, don't touch that kind of thing. Metering mode, this is very important. Evaluator metering is the one where it actually evaluates the entire scene, does it. And then partial metering is typically usually like around the middle 25% of, you know, the frame that it actually is reading from to get a decent enough exposure. This can be very, very good if you have backlit type of situations and you have situations where you have very weird type of lighting. Spot metering, very important. If you're shooting a very bright subject or backlit subject and the subject is actually in front of it, looks dark, and you want to make sure you get, hey, I want to get the skin of the subject right, but the sun is too powerful in the back, put it to spot metering, put that spot onto the subject, and you will get a very accurate reading. Center weighted is exactly that. It reads actually the entire scene, but it weighs the exposure more into the center frame. I think it's like 18 or 25% or something in the middle. You can look up the manual in there. I don't typically use center weighted, but if you do, leave it in the comments below. Detect priority, I typically leave this on. It's auto exposure while AF. So what this does is, depending on what it detects, the exposure is automatically set based on where your autofocus is, you know, reading the information. You will get better shots. Just leave this on. Okay, that's what that is. All right, page 2, done. Let's move on to page 3. Color, tone, and dynamic range. People's favorite subject, right? People love this subject. So in this particular one, this is where we actually get to set the picture style. When I shoot birds and wildlife, I never leave auto, because when you leave auto, this thing is making a decision on the colors and changing it depending on the scenes that it's actually seeing. Bad idea. Leave it to standard. And what that will do is that will allow you to get consistency in the color range across all your photos, and then you can obviously, if you're shooting raw, not a big deal, right? If you're shooting JPEG, you make the call. If you're okay with what you're seeing auto, fine. If you want consistency across the board, shoot standard. That's what I do. I usually never shoot the next one down, color space. sRGB is what I shoot in the camera. Adobe RGB is if you know for sure you're going to go into an Adobe product and do all of this color stuff, then yes, use Adobe if you really want to. I never do. I always use sRGB because if I don't edit on an Adobe piece of software and color palette, I can take it somewhere else and not have a major issue with my files. Clarity slider. This is pretty interesting. Okay, what this means is it automatically will actually increase some of your sharpness and your contrast on your photos for you, less or more. This is kind of cool if you're shooting like weddings and, you know, brides and grooms and models. You can do -2. Their skin looks awesome. You can do that right out of the camera, and you can show them the JPEG. But then you also have the RAW. Then you can fool around with it later. So a lot of this stuff that you're seeing here will impact JPEGs immediately. With the RAW, you know, you can obviously change it later. HDR stuff, don't touch it during, you know, birds and wildlife type of things. HDR PQ, you can actually see right here. If you turn this on, you're not shooting JPEGs anymore, you're shooting HEIF. If you have a fast enough computer or a computer that can handle HEIF files, yes, leave it here. If not, leave this disabled if you want to shoot JPEGs. Very important. Auto lighting optimizer, I usually leave it at standard or sometimes actually just disable it. This actually will slow down your camera, but you got to keep in mind it depends on the mode that you're in. You can already see if you shoot in manual, you can't set this anyway, right? Or a bulb mode, which is, you know, really long exposures if you want to do that. You will not be able to set that in those 2 modes. It says it right there. So this one is my favorite. Highlight tone priority. Highlight tone priority is very, very important. If you are shooting events, if you are shooting white birds with lots of white, please turn this on to at least enable, if not enhanced. Enhanced is going to give it even more you know, rigor on making sure that the whites actually truly stay whites without blowing out. Guys, I can't tell you enough. Most people that shoot Canon never understand this, and then they complain that, oh, dynamic range sucks. Of course it does, because you don't know how to use it. You actually blew out your exposure. So if you understand this and you know how to use these tools, you can get incredible shots. The shot of the egret that I shot, people were stunned. How'd you get that white to look so beautiful? That's how you do it, right there. Sorry, I should turn that thing. I have it so it actually automatically turns off after 1 minute now because I reset the camera in the beginning. I usually leave it at least at D plus right here. And to get into that, you got to hit the info button, which is the details of what it is. Now you can start to read what it is. There are certain modes that are actually set in there where you are no longer allowed to go on ISO levels. You can see it right there. The ISO speed value can be set from ISO 200 and above. You cannot get to 100 and or 50 anymore if you have highlight tone priority on. Frankly, I don't care. I'm gonna shoot at those anyway. Who cares? Most of the bursts that I shoot are, you know, 400 to, you know, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. So could care less. I'd rather preserve the highlights. So here you are. That's what that is. Use it. All right, that's page 3 done. Page 4 on the setup. Okay. If you come down here, auto white balance, there's a lot of things that go on in the Canon auto white balance section. That's automatic, daylight, shade, cloudy, tungsten. It's even telling you the values down below. White fluorescent, flash, custom. You have to shoot a photo and then use that as a custom. That's a whole different tutorial, but that's custom. You can do custom white balance, and then if you want to pick in the color temperature that you want. One thing that Canon does that's incredible is if you do auto white balance in here and then you actually hit info, it would help if I hit info. I hit the wrong one. Info. This is ambience priority and this is white priority. When I shoot birds in flight and birds and wildlife, I usually leave it white priority. I do this also for events. Very, very important. If you watch the screen, here, watch the screen, what it does. Give me one sec. Okay, now watch the screen. You will see could you see that change? And with the white priority, what you'll see how it got more of the bluish whiter tone, cleaner tone. That's what that is. So just make sure that you pick what works. I typically always leave it at auto white balance with the white priority. Set custom, you would have to shoot this, and it's telling you exactly what to do here. You can do that. I don't typically set custom for shooting birds and wildlife, but if you're shooting weddings and event, that's a whole different workshop that we can do. And then this is if you want to start to shift your white balance yourself, and it will. I wouldn't recommend doing this until you for sure are experienced and you understand how to use this. If you are, you probably don't need my tutorial at this point on how to do that. This is more on the greener side, this is more on the magenta, so you get the gist of what's going on here. Lens correction aberration, this is very, very important. The peripheral illumination correction should be on. Distortion correction for some lenses are available, for some lenses not available. On the 28, it's already pretty damn good. You don't need it. Even the EF lenses that you use that are adapted to the RF5 Mark II will read this information. Digital lens optimizer, it's kind of important. I usually leave this at standard, and it actually bakes certain things into those corrections into the files. Especially if you're shooting JPEG, turn this on, because it's going to correct it for you, so you don't have to deal with it and fool with it in post. So leave that on. Long noise reduction, I usually leave this disabled, because I don't do long exposures when I'm shooting bird and wildlife. If you're shooting astrophotography and things like that, you can knock yourself out, do whatever you need to. But that's what that is for. So if you if you're doing, especially in the bulb mode, that's what this one is. This is for when you use high ISO. I typically leave this to low. I'm setting this up again just like with you. I don't want the camera breaking anything into my files. I leave this to low or off. You can pick. You can leave it off. You can always apply noise reduction later. Dust delete data. This is things, as you can see here, it will remove dust, right, alongside the software, which is, Canon's DPP software. If you're going to use that, turn this on, and then when you take the file into DPP, it will find it and take care of it. All right, that completes page 4. Now we're into page 5. Multiple exposures. So multiple exposure is if you want to shoot multiple shots of something, right, and combine them up to, I think, 99 shots. That's what you can do. This is 9 shots. Oops, I was thinking of focus stacking. That's 9 shots. Multiple exposures, 9 shots. Focus stacking, 99 is what it is. You can save all the images, and then you can pick what you want. You want one shot only, or you want continuous, whatever you want, however you want it to save, it will actually save it for you. With birds, you're not really going to do that. Focus bracketing, here you are. There's 100 shots right there. That's what I was thinking of, the second one down. Focus increment, focus stacking is a whole separate subject. Not going to go into the detail here because you typically won't do that unless you're shooting bugs and stuff for wildlife. So maybe let me take a minute. You pick how many shots you want it to do. Usually 25 will get you pretty good. Focus increment, the higher this number is, the wider it's going to start and end the stack of the photos. Typically around 4 is pretty good that it recommends, and you're pretty good there. So you have to experiment and play with it. Exposure smoothing, do you want it to actually smoothen it out, or do you want it to be, you know, pretty sharp? And then obviously the depth of your composite photo, you need to tell it, do you want that in there or do you not? Some people like to do this in the software like Lightroom. I don't let the camera do all this. It's a lot for it. And then the flash interval, you can just pick how often do you want the flash to go off. That's what that is. Okay, so that's page 5. Page 6, drive mode. This is the fun part, right? Here's your 30 frames per second, 15, you know, and so on and so forth, all the way down to your self timers, and you can see it's pretty self-explanatory what it's telling you there. So there you are. There's that. And then pre-continuous shooting, it's exactly what it says. Once you turn this on, it will actually shoot half a second prior to you pushing on the button. So if there's a bird perched and about to take off and you have pre-shooting on, it will capture it in RAW. If you shoot in RAW, it will capture RAW. Right? Pretty cool. So interval timer is disabled. Why is that? Because we turned this guy on. It's even telling you what's causing it. So now if you want to do how many shots and you want to do a time lapse type of thing, that's what this is. Bulb timer, it's not available in this mode. You do have to go into the bulb mode. So if you hit the menu button up top and then you go into bulb mode like this here, now all of a sudden this becomes available. Okay, I'm going to come back here, push this again, go back over to maybe just manual mode and get rid of it. Okay, that's how you make that function come on. Silent shutter, if you want to shoot totally silent because you don't want to disrupt people, birds, animals, whatever, that's what this is right here. Okay, you just turn it on there, you get your 30 frames per second. No, you don't. This just doesn't make any sounds. If you turn that on, it won't make that funny fake shutter sound when you're in electronic mode. Here's where you select if you want to do the mechanical shutter, electric first curtain, and then fully electric. Okay, I typically, depending on what it is, right, I do shoot a lot of mechanical shutter. I shoot a lot of electronic too. This is a stack sensor, not a problem. So you can just shoot all electronic if you want, you should be fine. First curtain electric is kind of cool, electronic, sorry. It reduces a little bit of the vibration from the mechanical shutter. So it will make that electronic, and then the actual shutter will go off. Release without card. You want to actually turn this on if you want to be able to take a picture if there's no card in the camera. If you don't want the camera to take any pictures or be able to activate the shutter without a card in there, then just disable this, right? All right, there's 6 pages done. Now we're on to the 7th page, which is the assist shooting. This is kind of important. These are the functions that will really help you make your pictures better. Image stabilizer, IS mode, turn it on or off. Pretty simple. Still photo IS, always on or only for shot. This means that the image stabilizer is not on when you're just looking through the viewfinder and surfing around. In this mode, it will only come on right when you take the shot. Always on means it's always on, so it stabilizes the viewfinder, is what it does here. I'll show you, let me see. You can see how much more shaky it is here. Now, right when I'm about to take it, it'll stabilize it. But if I do this and leave it always on, you can see it's correcting it on its own. See? It does a pretty good job. It does work. Okay. Custom quick controls. These are kind of important, right? So you want to edit these out, and then you should reset and clear. You can clear the items. Nothing to clear because we did a factory reset. Let's go ahead and do it. Select the items to be displayed. What do you want to see, right? You can pick up to 11. What do you really want on here? So I have, well, not I have, out of the box, it will do AF area, one shot AF, 2 servo. This one is really important. I use this a lot because once you have this available, you can go from, you know, continuously tracking to a single shot, especially if something is perched. You don't really need AI servo. You just do a single shot and, you know, take off. When we do the autofocus section, which is the next section, not the shooting menu, we'll get into some really intricate stuff. Drive mode, I like that, and then the cropping aspect ratios, you want that, especially if you want the 1/6 crop available at your fingertips. I typically have it, you know, mapped to the MFM button up top, which I'll show you how to do later. And then image size and type. So if you want to actually, you know, make your JPEG smaller or your RAW smaller or whatever. I don't typically have this on there, but it's on there. I'm just showing you what's out of the box. Anti-flicker. I'll probably turn this off for birds and wildlife because you don't really need it. You can just turn it off. You don't need it. And then subject detection. This is kind of important. When you're doing that, you can pick whichever it is, or auto. White balance is there, and then picture style. Once you set the picture style to standard, I typically don't need this anymore, and I typically turn this guy off. So from there, you can pick focus bracketing, if you want flash, highlight, tone priority. All of these are things that we already set. Once you set them, you don't really need them. So you pick what you want. Pre-shooting, you can turn this on and off. I typically like to have this one available. Silent shutter button. You know, once I set it, I'm fine. IS mode usually is on for me. View assist, this is when you're shooting in HDR type of content. It will help you be able to see it when everything is so like washed out on the screen. Frames per second, display frames per second for your viewfinder. That's what this is, if you want to change that. Manual to autofocus if you want that. And then peak, this is peaking. And then you have the focus guide for manual focus. There you are. Those are my 11. So that's what I do. All right. So save and exit. There you are. Done. That's how you set up your customized quick controls. So you can go back, review what I just selected here in the video and set it. Metering timer. You can pick how often you want it to pick. I typically have this set to 4 seconds. Yes, it uses more battery, but I like a good exposure. That's just me. If you don't, that's up to you. That's page 7. Page 8. Image review. This is when you're actually reviewing the image on the back of your screen. How long do you want it to stay on? I typically leave it about 4 seconds, but if I'm doing an event, I'll leave it to 2 seconds or actually just turn it off. Right? I don't need it to show up on the screen after I take every shot what it looks like. So typically you want to turn it off, especially if you're shooting bird and wildlife on the outside. Viewfinder display, same thing. You want to enable that. There you are. High-speed shooting display, depending on where you are and which shutter mode you're on, whether it's available or not, that's there. This is very important. I like to turn this on. The moment I turn this on, the blackout free, you saw like these disappeared. I'm going to turn this off for a second so I can show you. Display simulation, this is very important. You want only exposure or depth of field, or you want both? Pick the first one. I usually just do exposure, and then exposure only during, you know, taking the shot, and it shows you the depth of field. You can do that. This will save you a lot of battery. So, and then you can obviously completely disable it. So mine is actually set to exposure. This is OVF simulation, similar to a optical viewfinder. And And if you turn this on, it behaves very similar to how we had an optical viewfinder. Try it and see if you like it. But ever since they have put this in here, I just have been using that more, which is the blackout free display. And then this is HDR that we talked about a few minutes ago. If you are looking at this, please, all I can tell you is pick which color gamut that you're actually going to use, and do you need the HDR assist on. Most of them are 709, so if you do it for 709, you should be fine. That's more broadcast quality. The other one, not so much. And then you can turn on whether you want to view assist to actually transmit through your HDMI or not. That's what that is. All right. So last page, shooting info display. You can actually pick the screen settings, what you want to actually see in the screen. So run through this and see what you would like to see based on how you shoot. Some of the things we already talked about earlier, they are going to transmit and translate here earlier in two pages back. Viewfinder viewfinder display toggles, and what this is it switches, as you can see on the screen, you'll see your autofocus point. Now you can see all of the other things that are there when you hit the info button, and then obviously your histogram is the third. So if you want all three, leave them there. If you don't want the first two and only want the third, you can do that, and you can customize it to any which way you want. I typically have it set to this. That's what I use. Viewfinder vertical display. I usually leave this on, which means if you turn it this way, it will actually flip with it. Grid, 3x3, 6x4. If you want to do rule of thirds, you can do the 3x3, and it does that. Puts a grid up there, so you can play with it, see what you like. Histogram brightness. So you can do brightness or RGB. I typically do brightness, and I typically will leave this to small when I'm actually shooting. So I'll show you when I go to this. You can see the histogram up on the top right. I use it a lot. If you don't know how to read the histogram, whole different topic. Learn bar metering for the whites and things like that. That's a different topic we can talk about. So I actually lost my frame of thought. Hold on. Hold on. Oh, it's down here. I'm in the wrong menu. My apologies. Electronic level. This is kind of important. It'll tell you whether your photo is actually going to be straight. Card space percentage. This is kind of important to know if you're doing a lot of high-speed shooting and you don't have time to go through it and figure out how much space you got left. Lens info display. It will show you the distance and all of that, the scale, if you put into manual focus. And same thing with the lens display. It will show you that. So this is the vertical exposure level. So when you go into vertical, the exposure up and down, that's what that does. It turns it on and off. And then you can actually hit reset here. Come back through, set the frame rate. I usually leave this to smooth because we have the blackout set. So this is to smooth. If you turn blackout viewfinder off, you can actually do here and actually go to power saving. Vertical display format, we already did this. Reverse format, this is if you want to flip things, you can do that. And I usually just leave it on. Auto power off for the temperature. You standard or high, just set it to high, you should be fine. It's not going to melt on you. It will give you a gauge inside to let you know something's up. All right, that was a lot. And that actually concludes that actually concludes the first shooting menu, and we're not even done. I'm going through this entire camera inside out just in the shooting menu, so you can imagine all the people that made these videos within just few hours of getting the camera, because they're geniuses, they know it all. You can just see how much we just talked about. So with that, we'll be back and let's go ahead and do the second section right after this.